Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I have a subscriber who is having a problem that many of you suffer from, which I'm going to flip in here, and I'll describe it here in a minute. But in fact, this is a problem that if you are not suffering from now, you probably will eventually in your training. So we really need to talk about it. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on doing a little bit of crafting, and yeah, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this. All right, this young man is having an issue to where he cannot progress anymore in the gym. And we know that progressive overload is the key to muscle growth. Unarguable. Every expert in the world agrees on this. We've known this for over 2,000 years. Ancient Greeks figured it out. They were smart people. They were smart enough to figure this out over 2,000 years ago. And we have found it to be true today. So, what happens when you can't progress? He's in a situation where when he tries to add weight on the bar, can't get any stronger. The reps go down. He tries to add reps with the same weight. He can't. He hits failure, doesn't progress week after week after week. All right. There's a couple different factors to address here because this can actually be a little more complicated than people think it is because there's more than one possible cause. Some of it's going to be programming related. Some of it's going to be law of adaptation related. Some of it could be diet and sleep related. All right. The first thing I'm going to suggest right up front, if you know that your training is in check, you are training hard, you think that you're training correctly, let's start looking at non-training factors first. Number one, are you getting enough sleep? You getting enough rest? And that's something too many younger guys overlook because, man, I know what it's like to be young. You guys like to party. You like to have a good time. And oftentimes, man, that will absolutely interfere with your recovery. You've got to make sure that you're getting enough sleep, enough rest. If you're going to go out and party and live life up on the weekends, you need to get extra sleep on the weekends to make up for it. But that aside, 8 hours of sleep. If you are not recovering enough to make progress in the gym and you are stalling, very first thing I'd look at is sleep. If you're not getting 8 hours of sleep every night, you need to make sure that you do so. If you can't, this is a problem for you. You need to find a way to work that in, even if that means training less. So you get extra time. You say, well, I can't quite squeeze in enough sleep time. Well, then back your training down and use that extra time to get some sleep. You have to do something because if you're not sleeping, you're not recovering. You're not recovering, you're not growing. All right, enough food. Let's be honest here. Not telling people they need a dirty bulk. I don't want people to think I'm inferring you need a dirty bulk or you need to get really fat or anything to gain muscle. You don't. That is simply not necessary. But you have to gain weight eventually. You have to gain size. And if you're sitting here stalling for a while and the scale has not gone up, or even worse, you're losing weight, if you're cutting, you're going to expect to stall. In fact, you can expect to lose a little muscle and even strength sometimes if you're cutting. That's the real world. That's why if your goals are body composition, getting too fat's a problem because you're eventually going to have to cut that fat. You're going to lose size and strength. So that's why people are generally advised to keep these things reasonable. But if you've been stuck at the same body weight, you haven't gained a single pound, single kilo in a couple of months, and you're stalled on your lifts, I can tell you what your problem is. You need to eat a little more. You need to be gaining a little bit of weight. Not a lot. I'm not telling you need to put on 10 pounds. Not telling you need to gain 10 pounds of fat. Not telling you need to increase your calories 500 or anything. But you do need to bump your food up. You need to bump your carbohydrates up. Bump your total calories up. And start slowly gaining a little bit of weight. You put on a couple pounds, you probably push through those plateaus. Again, you're not giving yourself enough nutrition to train on, to recover from, and to grow on. It's just that simple sometimes. That is what it is. Growing muscle requires fuel. You cannot create something from nothing. And oftentimes your body doesn't want to let you lose body fat in order to gain muscle. It'll just back off and say, okay, we're just not going to let you get stronger so you don't get bigger. That's just the nature of it. That's the real world. Deal with it. Now, assuming these things are in check, you know you're getting sufficient nutrition, sufficient sleep. A couple different ways you could go. Either number one, you're exceeding your maximum recoverable training volume and workload. Are you using so much volume that you're not recovering from it? Big factor. Probably one of the biggest problems a lot of natural guys run into. They've been training a little while. They keep increasing volume, and before long, they're reaching a training volume and a workload and fatigue that they can't recover from. Too many sets, too much training to failure, all combined together. They're lifting 5 days a week. They're drug-free. They go, but I got a friend who trains that way. He's bigger than me. Keeps making gains. I know he's not on drugs. Yeah, but that's not you. When it comes to things like recoverable volume and maximum recoverable training fatigue, these are individual. Yes, drugs play a factor, But genetics play a factor as well. Other lifestyle factors play a factor. Maybe your friend has less stress to deal with than you do. Maybe he's more mellow than you are. Maybe he has higher natural testosterone levels. Maybe he just recovers faster than you do from genetics. You know, there's a lot of factors going on. Just because you can't your friend recovers doesn't mean that you can. That's just the real world. It doesn't even necessarily mean he's on drugs. It just means that he is recovering better than you do. There's other factors involved. Deal with it. That's life. You should be concerned about, well, do I need to reach my friend's recovery ability, or do I need to focus on making my gains? You need to focus on making your gains. So if your workload is just too high, you're in the gym training 5 days a week and you're drug-free and you're having this problem, you're doing 15, 20 sets of body part a week, taking multiple sets for failure on each body part every week, or you know, you're taking a set to failure on every single exercise, doing multiple sets of it every week, all this volume, all this accumulated fatigue, I can tell you what your problem is. Your workload is too high. You're not recovering from it. You're exceeding your maximum recoverable fatigue. You are not recovering from your training, therefore you're not growing. Cut your workload in half. Limit the number of sets you're taking to failure. Stop doing forced reps. If you're going to train with volume, multiple sets per exercise, multiple sets per body part, excessive training to failure, forced reps, drop sets, all this stuff is going to become a problem for you eventually. Not at first. You might make great progress doing that for a few months, but eventually it will catch up with you. You're going to exceed your maximum recoverable fatigue and you're going to stop growing. Now, that's one potential problem. The other problem that people can run into is the exact opposite problem. You've stalled on your ability to gain strength with direct weight on the bar. That's one form of increasing overload, right? That's the easiest form. That is the fastest way, but it's also the quickest to burn out. Just flat adding more weight to the bar. We call that linear progression. Noobs do it best. They can do it longest. Eventually it'll run out. Then you have to add reps, because again, if you can add more reps with the same weight, you're going to get bigger, you're going to get stronger, you're going to make gains. What happens eventually, you get to a point sometimes, and this is why periodization exists. This is why people need to look at things like training volume. They need to look at things like adding reps, all of these things as different tools in the toolbox, because every single form of progression stalls from time to time, and when that does, you need to go to a new form. This is why periodization exists. This is the concept that was developed off of, because experts realize this working with athletes around the world. They stall with different forms of progression. Sometimes you've got to change the progression. Sometimes you need to program it. But the other thing you can do, okay, you can't seem to add weight to the bar, can't add reps with the weight. Your volume isn't so high that you're not recovering. I mean, you're only training 3 or 4 days a week, not doing a bunch of sets to failure. You know, you're not doing high numbers of sets. You're not coming in and doing 15 sets of body part, and yet you're still having this problem. Well, there's your problem. It's time for you to increase volume a little bit. You need to spend a phase to where you start adding sets. Add a set to every exercise you do. You do 8 different exercises every week, 8 different lifts. You need to bump that up. If you're doing 8 different exercises, add a set. If you're doing 1 set, go to 2. If you're doing 2 sets, go to 3. If you're doing 3 sets, go to 4. You need to increase your volume a little bit. And what I would recommend, increase it over time. If you can get to each exercise to where you can add a set for the same number of reps that you've been doing with the weight, once you get there, see if you can add yet another set. Over the course of 2 or 3 weeks' time of building that up, and if you can add 2 sets to all your exercises, 2 sets to all your exercises, over the course of 4 or 6 weeks, with the same weight, same reps that you have been using, guess what? You just made gains. You just got stronger because you increased your work capacity. You probably have put on some muscle mass as a result of doing that also. Fantastic. What you'll now be able to do, if that is you, you should be able to add weight to the bar now. Cut the sets back down, because that's the thing that people forget. Adding volume is just a training tool, nothing more, nothing less. It's not magical. So now that you use volume for 6 weeks to get bigger and stronger, you can cut the volume back down and go back to adding weight to the bar again. When that stops working, you can start adding reps. When that stops working, you can add sets again. It's a very, very simple philosophy, and I'm not saying it's the only way to progress. I have whole systems of training I've advised to people where they never increase their sets. You know what? That's fine also. These are just different tools in the toolbox. They all have their use. They all have your place. You have to use them wisely. And if you learn to use these different tools wisely and appropriately for your body and the way that you adapt and the way that you recover, you're going to find all these different tools have their place for you in your training. And if you learn to use them appropriately, you will stop stalling. You will stop having periods of time like that until you get really advanced. I mean, at a certain point, you're not going to be able to make much more progress till you go on drugs. Your progress is going to come to a grinding halt. Same thing with people who use drugs, of course. Eventually, they're going to have to increase the dose, or they're going to come to a grinding halt. But you know what? Learning to use these things intelligently and appropriately will help you limit these situations. It will let you make gains longer before these things happen. It's all about learning to use different tools. So in this case, for that person, increasing volume is probably going to help them. And then once they've used that, they can drop that tool. They can cut the volume back down to a more manageable level. Go back to adding weight to the bar, adding reps, and keep making more gains. You know, again, it's all about knowing the different tools and how to use them and how to rotate through them to keep yourself from having these sort of problems. And it's just stuff that you learn over time, guys. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.